Here's some of the stories we're watching for you right now. Vice President Harris flies over the southern border in search of the root cause of the unprecedented crisis there. But will she ever visit the border itself? Meanwhile, the origins of the coronavirus continues to be a hot topic in Washington, D.C., with Dr. Anthony Fauci under fire for his continual flip-flops on the science. And here's one for you. Law enforcement in Portland, Oregon has started enforcing the law. A little later, we're going to welcome Victory News contributor John Graves to discuss these and other stories of the day. First, let's go to Mike Garofalo for the top stories. Mike.
Greg, Vice President Kamala Harris is probably wishing she'd received a warmer welcome on her trip to Guatemala. Harris was greeted by protesters upon her arrival to the Central American country with signs that read "Trump won" and telling her to mind her own business. Now, the rally was visible to Harris's motorcade as she arrived to meet with Guatemala President Alejandro Yamatei one day after he blamed the U.S. for luring his constituents north. Now, during their joint news conference, Vice President Harris had a firm message for those thinking of heading for the United States.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come.
Harris departed Guatemala on Monday evening to travel to Mexico, where she will hold meetings today with President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Department of Justice made a big announcement on Monday in respect to the ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline.
The sophisticated use of technology to hold businesses and even whole cities hostage for profit is decidedly a 21st century challenge. But the old adage, follow the money, still applies. And that's exactly what we do. After Colonial Pipeline's quick notification to law enforcement and pursuant to a seizure warrant issued by the United States District Court for the Northern District of California earlier today, the Department of Justice has found and recaptured the majority of the ransom Colonial paid to the dark side network in the wake of last month's ransomware attack.
The DOJ says it seized 64 of the 75 Bitcoin that the owners of the Colonial Pipeline paid in ransomware. Now, due to the attack, Colonial took its 5,500-mile conduit offline as a result of thousands of gas stations ran out of fuel. And for those that still had gasoline, prices, of course, went up for consumers. Well, as the words of the nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, in respect to the origin of the coronavirus pandemic, continue to come under scrutiny. Let's take a listen to some clips Fox News aired over the weekend of what they called the Fauci flip-flop.
Dr. Barrett does not do gain-of-function research, and if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it is being conducted in North Carolina. And if you look at the grant and you look at the progress reports, it is not gain-of-function, despite the fact that people tweet that.
It would have been almost a dereliction of our duty if we didn't study this. And the only way you can study these things is you've got to go where the action is. So we had a modest collaboration with very respectable Chinese scientists who are world experts on coronavirus. And we did that through a sub-grant from a larger grant to EcoHealth.
Here is Texas Senator Ted Cruz calling Anthony Fauci out for what was learned from a Freedom of Information Act release of thousands of Dr. Fauci's emails.
Fauci commit perjury just there?
It sure looks like it. He looked at Rand Paul's eyes and told a flat-out falsehood. And unfortunately, this has been a pattern with Dr. Fauci, that what he says on Monday somehow isn't the same as what he says on Tuesday. But don't worry, what he says on Wednesday is almost certain to be different. And I got to say, this email dump that came out makes clear that this is not just being sloppy. It is systematic, and it is systematically an effort to mislead the American people. And as you noted, he wasn't doing it alone, but he was doing it with much of the U.S. government behind him, and with Facebook and big tech operating as an extension of the U.S. government.
Now, the email showed Facebook changed its censorship policy after Dr. Fauci and Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg exchanged correspondence. Tim, back to you.
Thank you, Mike. And a sign that things are beginning to change in the Antifa hotbed of Portland. More than 24 people were charged with rioting following months of citywide protests. The charges are a 180-degree turn for the left-wing district attorney Mike Schmidt, who last year dropped over 90% of the riot and protest-related cases. The county district attorney's office announced charges against 10 suspects following several grand jury indictments that ranged from felony riot, felony first-degree criminal mischief, and second-degree criminal mischief. Greg?
It's about time. The people of Portland have been held hostage for a long time. I want to welcome attorney, Victory News contributor John Graves. John, welcome back. It's good to see you.
Good to be with you.
Okay, let's go to this, the Colonial Pipeline, the ransomware, $5 million is what they ended up paying. And now the government says they were able to get, let me get this, 64 out of 75 of the Bitcoin, a majority of it. 85%. That sends a red flag to me. How, you're a computer expert, how can they do that?
You know, I think you are wise to point this out because Bitcoin's whole claim to fame is it's based on blockchain technology, which cannot be hacked into, cannot be gotten into. So how in the world did the Department of Justice hack in and get 85% of those? And what that reminds me, and what everybody should be asking, is if the Department of Justice can get 85% of a little bitty tiny one company, multi-million dollars, why can't they do the same thing for the 84 electoral colleges that are disputed and go see and investigate if there was or was not fraud? If there wasn't, everyone can silence the issue that half the country believe right now. So it proves that they can do it at the highest level. At the lowest level of rogue voter fraud, this should be looked into.
You know, I didn't put that together. I mean, I was thinking of other investigations, but when you put it to the election, wow. You're
it's a simple investigation. It's one of the ways they should make the elections more secure. If you can wire millions of dollars safely and securely through banks, and this is a rare example of something happen, if you have blockchain technology, you can make voting secure and make it tied to a citizen in the country that can prove they're a citizen so that you shut down all of the malfeasance, the fraud, and the criminal activity that happened. And here's the other thing. I would point out, what did the DOJ say? Follow the money. Mark Zuckerberg put $350 to $500 million in the big cities, in the swing states, where the greatest level of not possible fraud happened. And there's so many questions. Thankfully, there's a little bit of auditing going on, but it's not the DOJ coming to the rescue like they did for an oil company. They need to come to the rescue for the American people is what they need to do.
That's exactly right. Follow the money. We've heard it so many times. And now we're finding out with coronavirus as early as 2017 into all those years during the Trump years, this thing was manufactured.
And what did he just say? Use their words against him. He said it would have been a dereliction of duty not to look into this. It would have been a dereliction of duty not to study this. If there's a chance that there's voter fraud, there's a dereliction of duty not to at least investigate it, not at least do a forensic audit, do a true audit of these things. And what's happening, I'll go stronger than Senator CRUZ did. He said, well, did he commit perjury? That was the question he was asked. I'm saying absolutely yes. He's under oath to Congress. He lied over and over and over. He said masks did not work. He said he did not fund this. He said it did not happen in a laboratory. All of those have now proved false. And it's just going to get worse for him. But he's covered up. Again, by who? The same people who are at issue, follow the money in the election, the same people are covering up him. And don't think there's not a connection to those things.
Yeah, I saw some numbers just recently that you have a better chance of winning the lottery than you do to prove that COVID happened naturally. John Graves, thank you so very much. Mike, back to you.
Greg, enough is enough was the theme of a press conference in Miami on Monday. Here is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis talking about the two pieces of legislation he signed that aim to combat China's influence in the United States.
The goal of these bills is to stop, combat nefarious foreign influence and corporate espionage in Florida. If you look at what's gone on now with the coronavirus pandemic and the cover-up of the origins of COVID-19, it's pretty clear that this was a virus that almost assuredly leaked out of this lab in Wuhan. This is a lab where these scientists were working very closely with the Communist Party of China as well as the Chinese military. When you had these folks fall ill who were working in that lab last fall, the Communist Party of China decided to cover it up.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, one bill goes after China's ability to enter into agreements with public and private academic institutions. The second bill is called the Combating Corporate Espionage in Florida Act. It makes stealing and selling trade secrets a criminal offense. Both go into effect on July 1st. Protests in Minneapolis continue for the third straight night after U.S. Marshals shot and killed Winston Smith after trying to arrest him. Now, the gathering was largely peaceful with no arrests reported, in contrast to Thursday and Friday's protests, which saw fires lit, stores looted, and dozens of protesters arrested. Now, the U.S. Marshal said preliminary information indicates task force members were attempting to arrest Smith, who was wanted on a state warrant for being a felon in possession of a firearm. Smith, who was in a parked car, did not comply with law enforcement and produced a handgun, resulting in task force members firing upon the suspect, the U.S. Marshal said in a statement. Greg, back to you.
All right, test of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine started Monday in children ages, are you ready for this, 5 through 11. Just outside New Orleans, children held stuffed animals, played under chairs at Oxnard Medical Center. Their temperature and blood pressures were checked, noses swabbed, blood drawn for tests, and finally they got a shot of either the vaccine or a placebo. Oxnard is among 98 facilities in 26 states, the District of Columbia, Finland, Poland, and Spain, where these tests are taking place or are planned to take place. Families won't know for 6 months whether their children actually were vaccinated. And at that point, children who didn't get the vaccine will have the chance to do so. Tim?
My goodness. Here's some great news, though, for people who are excited to get back to traveling. Royal Caribbean Cruises announced that it will not require COVID vaccines for passengers on some of its ships. The cruise line did say that it would be strongly encouraging passengers to get the vaccine, but for those who choose to abstain, there will be other ways to ensure they're able to safely enjoy the cruise. The new rules were announced as the company said it will resume cruises on 6 new ships from U.S. ports this summer, starting with the Freedom of the Seas from Miami on July 2nd. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has threatened to fine cruises $5,000 each, cruise lines, each time they require a guest to show proof of a vaccination. Now, it's unclear whether the change in vaccination policy is in response to the state ban. Okay, John, this is that chicken or the egg argument here. Cruise ships talking about, we're going to have these vaccine passports. Then Governor DeSantis, we're not going to have that nonsense in my state. And all of a sudden, they're not going to require them. Which came first?
Exactly. I think leadership comes first. Honestly, I think that's a good way to say it. The leadership of the Florida governor, even the Texas governor, is finally slowly starting to follow the leadership of the Florida governor. DeSantis has impressed me. He's been open for over a year. He took a leadership when people at every level of government were bowing down to fear, unreasonable fear. And now that we see the Fauci emails, it's even more unreasonable fear and wrong ways to fix it. Fauci says the masks don't work, and now we've mandated everybody to wear mask or double mask when the chief person who's pushing it says this doesn't work. And so it's sound-mindedness and leadership of the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, that's very impressive. And people, again, follow the money. Hey, we're not going to allow this in our state. And he took a huge risk doing that because these cruise lines are coming and picking up a lot of people in one of the top 4 states in the country. And then Texas is now saying they're going to follow his leadership. And so that's what people are looking for. They're desperate for leadership.
Absolutely true. There's been a vacuum of it. John, I want to follow the science. Let's follow that science again. Now with Pfizer having the COVID-19 test for children, let me get this right, ages 5 through 11, we know from the science that they are the least at risk for coronavirus and the least likely to pass it on or transmit the disease.
Yeah, I like the way you say it. Follow the science, and what else have we said on the show? Follow the money. And so the money to force this by fear and by government mandate and by employer mandate and by school mandates, some of the universities are now requiring it of all their students. It's insane, but you follow the money, and then they don't follow the science. They follow the science when it fits their narrative. And so people can get vaccines, people can choose to do that with their kids, but there needs to be freedom if you say, I don't want that because I have followed the science, I don't believe it works, or I have a religious objection to that. We've always been able to do that in this country, particularly the state of Texas, and that's my concern as people give up their freedoms. It's a slippery slope. You start giving up a little bit, and then they give up more and more and more, and the government steps in and becomes God instead of a man and a woman listening to the Holy Spirit, listening to the Word of God and following it.
Right. We've always said, and I'm going to continue to say it again, if you want to take the vaccine, take it. Yep. We're not coming against you or trying to shame you in any way. If you don't want to take it, we support that as well. But that's the whole point, John. We should have the ability to choose as a free American.
That's exactly right. It's religious freedom. Freedom is not just, I want to be free to hide in my own home underground to worship, or to be free to worship alone all by myself. Freedom of expression of religion in the First Amendment, which was the key reason this nation was founded, of people persecuted by the government telling them about their freedoms. This whole nation was founded on that. We need to be free to engage freely in society, and people can take that risk. If you believe in the vaccine, go get one. I'm not harming you, but if you have it, I shouldn't be harming you if I don't have a mask and don't have a vaccine. I should also be free to do that, or to wait until the science is out there enough that I come to choose. So some people will say, hey, I just want more evidence before I take the vaccine. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but some people will say, I don't want that in me. I'm trusting God or other natural means or other things. They need to be free to do it. And if you've got it, if you believe in those things, then you shouldn't be worried about it because there's no harm. That's
absolutely
done.
true.
And so freedom is the root issue. Right. You're right.
And we are not motivated by fear. We're motivated by faith.
Right. And unreasonable fear. That's what this whole last year and a half has been. I mean, Fauci's email, the very first email, he said we cannot let unreasonable fear take over and close the government down. That's what he was talking about. And then he pivoted.
And that's something. John Graves, thank you so much. Mike, back to you.
Greg, President Biden is heading to Europe this week. He will strategize with world leaders from the G7 democracies and other NATO allies before confronting Russian President Vladimir Putin about global issues during a meeting in Geneva.
And the trip, at its core, will advance the fundamental thrust of Joe Biden's foreign policy, to rally the world's democracies to tackle the great challenges of our time.
Now, the trip is a continuation of the Biden administration's push to show the world that America is back following the 4-year reign of former President Donald Trump, and is ready to tackle serious issues like the coronavirus pandemic, climate change, and U.S. allies' security concerns. Well, Biden and other leaders of NATO members countries plan to discuss tense ties with Russia and China, the troop withdrawal from Afghanistan, and the future of the 30-nation military alliance at a summit in Belgium on June 14th. Well, thousands of police officers have begun arriving in Cornwall on the southeastern tip of England ahead of a summit meeting of the Group of 7 wealthy democracies. Around 6,500 officers are set to secure the event, which will host several leaders, including, of course, Joe Biden, between June 11th and the 13th. Fences have been erected, roads have been closed, and security checkpoints installed across the area. Prime Minister Boris Johnson will use the G7 meeting to urge world leaders to commit to vaccinating the global population by the end of 2022. Member nations have also agreed to support a global minimum corporate tax of at least 15% to deter multinational companies from avoiding taxes by stashing profits in low-rate countries. Greg, back to you.
All right, I want to bring John Graves in here. John Graves, that G7, if you never believed that the entire goal was a one-world government, that story proves it. I heard Janice Yellen talking about it. I want to read this statement. Listen to this, that the member nations have also agreed to support a global minimum corporate tax of at least 15%. That means if you have a business in America, you're going to give to an international group. China's not part of that. They're laughing all the way, John Graves.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. You're right to point that out. The scripture's very clear. As believers, we know hints of the end times. We don't know everything. We don't know the hour of the day. The angels long to look into that. But clearly, we're headed to a one world government. It reminds me, I can't remember, Greg, if you have to look it up, if it's Psalm 2, where the nations rage and the nations mock God, and God laughs at it. Y'all can do whatever you want to do. I'm still God. I created all mankind. I created all the nations. As believers, we need to discern the times, know those things, and know what to do about it, and not be a part of that. There's nothing biblically wrong with being a nationalist, saying God founded this nation. There's only two nations founded, one by God, Israel, and we need to protect and pray for the peace of Israel, but the other one was founded to worship the God of the Bible, and that's America. And so there's nothing wrong with protecting it, not worshiping it, not putting it before God, not putting a candidate or a party or a nation before God. But those all the way through the scripture, nations have had boundaries. And notice the first story of our newscast. The vice president flies over the border to go to another nation while acting in all the policies that president says are driving the crisis at the border, and says, oh, don't come. So I've said it. I've said the right thing I'm supposed to say, but the truth is everything I'm doing, all my actions say, come on up here. And that was the promise of Biden during his campaign. And so we're a nation of borders. They're trying to make us one nation that they can all control, and then put us under this government socialism, and then put us under global socialism. And the problem is then it's going to be the communist China or Russia or whoever controlling it. At this point, China's becoming the superpower.
So what sometimes I think people fail to see, John, is what I call putting the bow on it. That COVID, the border,
there you go.
G7, all of these things are coming together and they're aligning for a very bad cause. But we know that God is still good. God, and He's going to win. And we're not going to be motivated by fear. We're not afraid of COVID.
And the way you can, that's exactly right. The way you can tie a bow, the way you can tie a bow on it is follow the money.
Follow the money. Thank you so much, John Graves, for being with us today.